Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. In this video I'm going to demonstrate color basing. Color basing is a really wonderful painting technique. However, it's not something you see often because it does require several extra steps and a little bit more work than, for example, black basing. Black basing is the more common type of painting method you see. So in color basing, you're kind of doing the same thing as black basing, except you start with a white primer. And the reason is the white helps the paint shine through a little bit more. Black hides the paint a little bit, so you want white really for this technique. And then what you're going to do is, the first step is to add in the color, the main colors, without doing anything to them. So as you notice in the kit here, the Banshee, I am airbrushing the main underneath color, the sky gray. And then once I'm done with the sky gray, I'm going to do some mottling using the sky gray itself. In black basing, you do some mottling using white. Here you're going to use the color to do the mottling for the color. Another thing I should mention in this kit is this kit went horribly wrong. There was definitely a moment here and there I was going to take this kit and throw it against the wall. And I decided to stick to it and just, you know, beat it into submission and get a finished model. But I'll explain some of the things that went wrong. I've never experienced some of these problems before. So it was a learning experience and a experience in being patient as well, because that's part of modeling. Modeling is overcoming obstacles. Okay, time to come in and do some mottling. I have mixed the main color with 50% white and thinned it heavily. And I'm going to come in and I'm just going to aim for the middle of each of those panels and do some mottling that way. I'm going to keep the airbrush moving and my hand moving the entire time. And I know it doesn't look pretty. I know it looks a little weird and not that great, but I promise it's going to get better. This is just part of the step. So just keep going. And don't worry about the mess right now. Now I will say that if you focus on particular panels and add in more paint, it's going to make those panels lighter in shade than the other panels. And you want to do that to create some other variations among the panels themselves and not just the mottling effect. So there's two things at play here, the mottling and then how much you can lighten some of the panels. So keep that in mind. So for example, that panel I was working on is a little bit lighter than some of the other panels, and that's going to create a nicer variation in the camel work later on. Notice on this side of the wing I didn't go as heavy as that side. Okay, now that I'm done with the mottling, I'm going to come in and I'm going to airbrush a heavily thinned main color over the mottling effect. And why is it heavily thin? Because I don't want the paint to cover up the mottling. It's almost like a tint I'm airbrushing on. I want that paint to go on there and let the mottling come through slightly, and it creates a nice variation in the paint and a very nice look to the paint. And in my opinion, it leaves a really gorgeous finish. I personally think when you do color basing, you don't really need to do weathering, because that effect really produces a nice vivid weathered aircraft, and you just look at it and you're like, wow, this is really nice looking bird here. And so you just need to do a light pin wash and call it a day, in my opinion. But to get to this point, there's a lot of steps, because you have to do this for every one of the colors of your aircraft. So it's easy on a single tone camouflage aircraft, but if you have 3 camo colors, you know, it's time consuming and laborious. So that's why I don't think you see it as that often in the modeling community. But as you can see, it's really nice. Look at that beautiful finish we have. So on the top side, we're going to do exactly as we did on the bottom side. We're going to come in, we're going to airbrush the main camo color here. And I should mention, for this build, I'm using Vallejo Model Color, not Vallejo Model Air. And the reason for that is several modelers on Hyperscale, experts in Banshee, recommended this as more of the correct color for the aircraft versus the dark slate gray color that's recommended. So I didn't have the dark blue gray in Vallejo Model Air, and I had to use my Vallejo Model Color. But as you can see, once it's thinned with my thinning formula, I have a video on this, you can airbrush it perfectly fine. There's no issues, no tip dries, nothing, etc. It goes on beautifully, and as long as you follow my formula and how I recommend airbrushing, you're going to get fantastic results. I should mention that this color is a semi-gloss type of color, so it left a really nice satin kind of like finish. And here's the final results, looking very nice. Now it's time to do the mottling effect on the top camo. And again, as we did on the bottom, thin paint, small needle nozzle, keep the airbrush moving, and that's really about it. Make sure to lighten some panels a little bit more than the other ones to get a nicer effect. And that's really it. So nothing too complicated here. It just takes a lot of time with color basing, but again, really worth it. So you can see on one side of the airplane, the left side, I've already done it, looks pretty good so far. And really what mottling does is it kind of forces out the panel line. So it's almost a reverse panel line shading in a way. It's very therapeutic, by the way. I really love doing this. So if you're an airbrush person, I think you probably enjoy this part a lot, and it's far simpler than people make it. Keep your airbrush moving, keep your hand moving. There we go. And you can see the final results of the mottling on the top. So now that we are done with the mottling, we're going to put on the main color. Again, heavily thinned, it's almost like a tint, because we don't want to cover the mottling here. We want that mottling to really impact the paint and make it look used and worn and create a very vivid look. So I'm just going in there with this heavily thin paint. As you can see, the ratios and the PSI I'm using here. And it's looking great. Again, I really love color basing. I think it produces a very vivid look. Just looks fantastic in my opinion. And it creates, as I said, like it forces the panel lines out, so it's almost like reverse pre-shading, and you can see the panel lines are sticking out a little bit more. It creates a lovely used look. Much better than black basing, to be honest with you. I don't think black basing produces as a vivid look as color basing does. Although, again, color basing takes a lot more steps. So I'm just going to go in there, lightly, gently add in paint, not flooding the area, and as you can see, really lovely, just fantastic results in my opinion. I wanted to talk about painting the nose cone of the Banshee, and the reason I want to talk about that is the nose cone of aircraft of that era were black, but it's not really a black, it's more of a satin black. And I was out of satin black or gloss black as well. And a trick you can do in those kind of situations is if you use acrylic paint, you can add in a little bit of Future or your preferred gloss, and it will turn the paint a satin color. And this way I have now a satin black color for the nose cone. So a little trick to keep in mind if you ever happen to be in that situation. So I'm painting the metallic areas of the airplane. Now, I have to say, you know, these 1950s, 1960s airplanes, they look simple to airbrush, but the reality of it is sometimes they can be more complicated than modern fighters because they have all of these separate areas and things that you have to do a lot of masking and prep work and such, and that's the case here. Notice how much tape I have to use and cover everything. I'm using tape and I'm using masking liquid because tape is expensive, so it's better to use masking liquid once you get the tape down. But it takes a lot of work to do these small parts for these type of airplanes. On the exhaust, I'm using a darker shade. I'm using dark aluminum just to give it a little bit of a difference and a little bit of a warmer tone, because the engines, they get hotter, so it looks better that way. Here's where the problem started. As soon as I was done painting the metallic areas and I removed the tape, there was residue all over where the tape was. No residue where the masking liquid was, only where the tape was. So the tape did something, and I'm not sure what it is. I've never ever had tape do this to my paint. It weakened the paint, it lifted the paint. As you can see, as I was trying to fix it, it just ruins the paint just if you touch it. So I had to resand everything. I tried wiping it away, that didn't work, so I had to resand. Then I had to reprime, then I had to repaint. So basically I lost all of that work because with all that sanding and priming and painting, the shading that I did, the color basing, disappeared. So I went from a lovely vivid look to more of a solid finish. And this was just one of the many problems with this build. But as I said, I was not going to let it defeat me. But I'll go through some of the other issues. Again, never had this happen before in 10 years of using acrylics. Once everything was sanded and ready for paint again, I went in and tried to fix some of the blemishes. Now on the top side, it wasn't too bad. I had to do a lot of sanding, a lot of priming in certain areas. You're not seeing all of the video because I lost it, unfortunately. Then I had to come back in and repaint everything. And I just didn't have time to do the color basing again. I have a life, so I couldn't sit there and do this, especially as I had work and other things that were taking up my time. So I went in and fixed everything. However, by fixing everything, I pretty much lost all my color basing effect that I had. And that's what really made me sad about this model. All that work gone down the drain, and I lost all of that wonderful, beautiful color basing. On the underside, it was much worse. I actually had to strip the paint down all the way to the bare plastic because of the residue. So it was much worse underneath, but I don't have video of that. I didn't remember to record it, so you only see the top side. But you know what? That's one of the things about modeling. You are going to have to deal with issues that come up and not give up and continue. And so that's what I'm doing here. So yes, this happened, but I'm not going to let it stop me. So here's after all of the blemishes fixed. Time for the decals, and the decals on this kit are horrendous. I complained that Tamiya decals are bad. No, Hobbycraft decals are 10 times worse. I had sprayed a coat of AK Gauzy agent before I decal, and I had to use so much of Mr. Hobby decal setting solution that it ate through the AK Gauzy agent and ate the paint. That's how bad these decals were. That's how much Hobby setting solution I had to use because of these decals. And then also the placement of the decals is incorrect on the instructions. The navy symbol should actually be over the landing gear cover. It's not shown like that, so I had to readjust and cut that portion out. So the decals and even the detail instructions are just wrong. So I wasn't happy with the decals at all, and this caused a whole lot of After fixing all of the decal issues caused, I went ahead and repainted the areas that needed to be fixed. As you can see, where I'm pointing out, that's where the majority of the areas were, and that's where the paint was eaten through. But as you should also be able to tell, the camo is no longer the color basing scheme I did earlier. It has changed. It's become more monotone, and I pretty much lost all of the color basing because of all of these issues. And it's just unfortunate, but you know, I wanted to finish this kit, so I didn't care that I didn't have the color basing anymore. I was determined to finish this kit. Here I'm adding in another layer of AK Gauzy Agent because I'm going to do some oil weathering. The Canadian Banshees were never really that dirty. However, I did find one picture where the underside of another aircraft was a little bit dirtied, oily looking, and I want to recreate that with oil colors. So I need another varnish before I do that. Time to do some weathering on the underside, and I found a picture of a Banshee, Canadian Banshee, which had a lot of wear and tear on the underside, not on the top. I'm assuming some oil leaks and stuff, so I wanted to recreate that using a dark brown ish color. And all you have to do with oil paints is just put them on and then dab them away with a dry brush and kind of blend it in. And that's what I'm doing here, as you can see, and it leaves a really nice stained looking effect. And represents oil leaks and things like that. And it's funny, modeling is about recycling, because oils were all the rage when I started modeling, and then they disappeared and now they're back, and now you can see the oil effect on the bottom. So my standard wash for modeling is the Flooring Models or Ultimate Modeling washes. In this case, I'm using the Ultimate Modeling Light Dirt Wash, and I think it's not the best wash for these colors, but I couldn't find my gray wash. Normally for gray colors, you want to stick with a gray wash and not a dirt wash, but at this point I was just wanting to get done with the model. I had so many problems with it. And then there's a last remaining problem that is coming up soon here. So as you can see, I'm done with the wash. Looks pretty decent. Oil weathering on the bottom. And by the way, when things like that happen, when the wash gets into small areas, use a Q-tip, moistened Q-tip, to get that out. So I wanted to demonstrate that as well. But as you can see, model is washed. It has some oil weathering. It's not exactly how I wanted it to look, but it's almost there. Time for the final coat. And looking at pictures online, I noticed the the Canadian Banshees were not a flat finish, but more of a satin finish. So I wanted to use a satin gloss coat here to recreate that look. And the key to any sort of satin or gloss airbrushing is make sure you use low air pressure and it goes on wet. That's key here. It needs to level out, so it needs to go on wet. This is also where I had my final issue with this kit. There are little stubs at the end of the wings, and that's where the drop tanks go. And I was going to build this kit with drop tanks, except I lost the drop tanks. So then I had to go back in, cut those stubs off, sand those areas down, reprime, recolor, and do all of that stuff all over again on the wings. So again, this was just kind of a problem build for me, but I'm glad I finished it because it is a unique aircraft. It's different. It's not exactly how I wanted the finish to be, but it's a fun little aircraft to have in your collection. You don't see it that often, especially in Canadian colors. So here's the final results of the satin.